Hello, and welcome to the Cryptocurrency News Channel. Today, we're actually going to discuss why XLM and XRP maybe won't get the same gains as 2017, and also why they actually haven't been doing so well this particular quarter, and some of the reasons that the price for both of them have been lagging. If you've actually watched we're actually going to start with more recent news this quarter, and then we'll actually move to the 2017 stuff. If you actually look at the recent performance in this particular quarter, see that XRP for the last 3 months has basically gone straight down in terms of Bitcoin price and has even fallen a bit in terms of USD price, even though it's held fairly steady, but it's fallen a lot in Bitcoin price because the price of Bitcoin has gone up and XRP has not followed. You can see it starts here at 8,665 sats, and now it is at 5,099 sats. That's basically over 33% loss in terms of BTC value. And if we go back even further and just look at it since the beginning of this year, on January 1st, it was 36 cents in USD. Now it's 30 cents, so that's a 20% loss since January 1st, and it was 9,446 Satoshi as opposed to just over 5,000 now. That is like a 40% or more loss for XRP. XLM has not fared very much better. If you look at the last 3 months, you can see the Satoshi value has gone from 2,190 all the way down to 1,617. It did have a revival in March, but then it suddenly went straight down. If you look at the USD value for Stellar, since February, it's slightly up, but since January, I believe it actually has fallen. It's going to be pretty close. In January, it's 11 cents. Right now, it's 9.6, so it actually has fallen about 15% since January 1st. And as you can see, the Satoshi value, except for this brief respite in March, has gone straight down. And we're going to actually talk about why that is. Now, XLM and XRP have been two of the, if not the two worst performing cryptocurrencies this quarter since the beginning of the year. I think Bitcoin SV might be the other one, but we all know that Bitcoin SV is trash. So we're not actually going to compare XRP and XLM with Bitcoin SV because I don't believe XRP and XLM are trash. They've just been having a tough time this quarter. For XRP, the explanation is pretty easy, honestly. If you actually look at them last quarter, from September until November, or December, this was when the hash war was actually happening. And everything else fell while XRP actually held its price pretty well until December. But unfortunately, a lot of that was predicated on a lot of false hype and lies, basically, like, oh, it's going to go to $50 in one night on November 19th, or it's going to be $5.89 at the beginning of the year. You might say, like, not a lot of people believe that, but there are a ton of people on the internet that actually believe that stuff and continue to believe that nonsense. So there were a bunch of people that believe that, and that actually floated the price up a lot. You can tell that a lot of the whales actually took advantage of that, mainly because on the night of the 18th, like literally 3 hours before the 19th, markets actually opened on the 19th. Well, I guess you can't really talk about markets opening because crypto's 24/7. But before 8 o'clock Geneva time, which is where Swift was based, and like Swift was supposed to turn everything on at that date, the price of XRP suddenly tanked massively right before that particular date. It doesn't show on this graph because it was a really fast tank, but I do actually remember that because I was staying up that night to see like what would actually happen. And like I predicted, it actually tanked right before that date because all the whales knew nothing was going to happen. So they basically just sold out. They actually just sold out right before that date, and I do believe it tanked from like 52 cents to 42 cents within like 5 minutes, and it never quite completely recovered until late in December, a little bit, when we had the Binance news. Now, the Binance stuff was actually real, but I think some people misinterpreted it to think that Binance was actually going to use XRP as its primary base pair, and of course that didn't happen. They just added 2 base pairs. People realized that wouldn't do anything, and so since December, it's actually come down. I think the psychological effect of it not being anything close to 589 also affected a lot of noob investors that got sucked in because they were like, oh, we're going to be rich by the end of the year. Obviously, that didn't happen. So a lot of them probably started to bleed sell. And it's actually accelerated since the beginning of Q2. You can see the slope here with respect to Bitcoin has gone straight down. So realistically, some people can say it's being held at 30 cents or like it's being propped up at 30 cents because it's basically been at that resistance forever. It's dipped down a little bit below 30 cents for a couple of days, but then it, Bitcoin rose a little bit and then it rose again, but now it's heading back down towards 30 cents. It seems like it's just attacking that 28 to 30 cents resistance right now. Hopefully it doesn't break through, but XRP is honestly going through a natural cycle where it actually went up in Q4 of 2018 when everything else went down. So it's going through like a more natural retrace. Now this retrace is a lot heavier than I thought, because if you actually look at the Satoshi value, we were at 4329 before XRapid started. But the problem with XRapid, the problem with the XRapid case is that despite XRapid launching, there's still very little volume, if any, flowing through XRapid from day to day. So that wouldn't actually help price very much. So we're going to probably dip below 5,000 Satoshi in terms of Bitcoin ratio. And we actually might end up in the same Bitcoin ratio as here, around 4,200. Hopefully it doesn't dip any further than that, because if it does, then I don't really see that much of a bottom. So the other thing is Stellar and XRP actually move kind of almost in unison, and those two have a lot of the same use case. They even run off a lot of the same code base, and they've actually both lost a lot. So I think overall people are looking at the remittance industry and they're not as high as in the remittance industry, at least not for the next year or so as other industries. If you look at Stellar XLM, you can see like they like XRP, they actually didn't lose all that much from September to November. They did lose a lot, like, with the hash war and everything, but they actually fared very well until basically November 22nd, 21st, which surprisingly is when that the first couple of days after the hash war started, Stellar actually fared okay. But surprisingly, in the same way, when that whole thing, like when the whole, prediction fell apart on November the 19th, they started going downhill too. And they follow a very similar pattern to XRP. They didn't hold the price as high as XRP did for as long. But essentially this quarter, you can see since the beginning of the year, they've been basically in free fall since March as well, after the whole, like the whole IBM announcement. Now for XLM, I think they are too dependent on IBM. They are completely dependent on what IBM announces. So they don't have enough announcements themselves. Yes, they have partnered with a few things, but there's not enough excitement to actually get investors back up. So XLM has been suffering as well because IBM only makes an announcement every once in a while, and I do believe IBM is working very, very hard behind the scenes to get adopted at many banks. They say they have like 40 banks plus several central banks wanting to issue stablecoins on the IBM blockchain, on the Stellar protocol, but we haven't heard too much from that sense. So it's kind of suffering from lack of news. But the thing is, like, Stellar never really had as much hype as XRP, so they don't have to deal with the backlash from like a bunch of like fake rumors, basically. But because of the lack of news, besides this little pump in March, it has been going straight down in terms of BTC value. It's held okay in terms of USD value since the beginning of the year. So it's behaving a lot like XRP. Now, the thing is, I actually think for, especially after Q4 last year, people are beginning to tire of remittance coins, especially because XRP and XLM are the two like premier remittance coins. I think people are just starting to tire of them because people are starting to realize, well, those people that aren't in like the fan clubs, obviously, they're starting to tire of them because they're really beginning to see that remittance coins for money transfers, they're going to face more regulatory hurdles than many other coins like supply chains. And it's going to be probably a few years before they really, really take off, barring like an overall market bull run, of course. And an overall market bull run doesn't really matter which coin you have, you're going to make a lot of money regardless. So because they see that remittance coins actually have a lot of hurdles, more hurdles than regular coins, they may not be as bullish on them. And for people that are really looking at the market from an analytical standpoint, not just like, oh, I'm going to be rich because everyone's going to use my coin to transfer money. I mean, that kind of nonsense. They're looking at the market from an analytical standpoint. If you really look at it, it really appears that the market's going to be segmented in several ways, and people are going to use different coins for different countries. If you look at it, like for Venezuela, Argentina, and a lot of the other coins, they're already using Bitcoin for remittances, and they're really big on Lightning. I'm not really sure if I'm that big on SegWit and Lightning, but right now, people say that like 40% of all Bitcoin transactions are using SegWit, and that's why transactions have been a lot faster. And also, even though the transaction volume has climbed up to near 2017 bull run levels, the price of each Bitcoin transaction is much smaller than it actually was. So we have that. We have like those developments in progress, especially with SegWit and Lightning. Bitcoin transactions are becoming much faster and much less costly. So there are countries that are actually starting to use Bitcoin. We also have the development of stable coins by JP Morgan, MUFG, Mitsuo, and all these large corporations. And if you actually just like don't drink the Kool-Aid and take a look back from it, those coins are going to eat up like a lot of the cross-border market too, especially like when you're transferring from JP Morgan to the various branches in JP Morgan and other countries. And a lot of big businesses do actually do that for corporate remittances. People have also learned that the retail remittance market isn't nearly as big as they thought. It's basically like it's projected to be about 3 billion a day by 2030, and that can result in a pretty good price boost for XRP or XLM. It's just not going to be like hundreds of dollars like some people are expecting. If you're expecting $4 or $5 with that kind of boost, that's probably possible. If you're expecting like $100 of that boost, it's not really going to work. And I think some other people are also looking at USC coin, a lot of the other stable coins that are actually coming in, and people are actually seeing that there are big corporations that are going to use that for internal money transfer across borders, especially if they deal with the same, if they just deal with different branches of the same bank in both countries. So people are starting to realize that there is competition. It doesn't really look like there's going to be a unified coin that everyone's going to be using, and it is going to be segmented. Even though Stellar and Ripple might be poised to capture a decent chunk of the market, there's not going to be like, it doesn't really look like there's going to be like a huge dominant coin for the entire market anytime soon in the future. Plus all that plus all the IMF, World Bank, random stuff. Like you can't feed people the same hype over and over again and expect them just to eat it up like every single time. And people are seeing a lot of like rehash old news, both on YouTube and just on the various crypto sites. And I think a lot of people that haven't drunk the Kool-Aid and aren't in the fan club just really aren't believing in the stuff anymore. So that's why I think XRP and XLM have both suffered a lot. If you look at both of them, they've actually held about the same price in terms of USD. And so if you're going to have the same theories about someone is holding the price down for XRP, you're going to have to say the same thing for XLM because it's basically like the same case. If you look at both coins, they're both very, very steady. They've both been pretty steady in terms of USD price for several months. They're in the same market. They're for many of the same purposes. And they're kind of almost going for the same type of clients as well. So that's why I think XRP and XLM have moved in unison because they're very similar. And also because people have kind of lost the hype on remittance coins because they are seeing that there's competition coming in, and also because they realize that regulations are going to take a long time in this market. I doubt regulations will actually come through by the end of this year. But let's go back to 2017 and why I actually don't think that these two particular coins are actually going to fare well. They're still going to fare well if there's a bull run. They'll both gain. But I don't think they're going to have the same percentage gains they did in 2017. And if you actually look at the graph for both XRP and XLM in 2017, most people concentrate on the November run for both XRP and XLM. But that's actually not what you should concentrate on for XRP and XLM. That's not where most of the percentage gains are actually have actually been made. The biggest percentage gain for both these coins was actually early in the year, in April, with XRP going from like essentially in March, a little more than half a penny to by May, they were at 30 cents. And XRP, XLM, same thing. In March, they were 0.002 cents, 1/4 of a cent. And by May, they were already 4 cents. So XRP did, something like 60x, and XLM did something like 20, 30x in that time period. And if you look at XRP during the big bull run, they essentially started pretty close to 30 cents and went up to $3. So they did about like a 12, 13x during the November bull run. Stellar, kind of the same story, 20, 30x here. And during the bull run, they basically did like 25, 30x. But if you just look at the time period from November 2017 to January 2018, Stellar and XRP aren't like standout performers compared to the other small altcoins. Like if you look at Tron from November to their height in January, which by the way is the peak of Tron was the exact same day as XRP. Same thing with Cardano. So Tron basically in November went from 0.2 of a cent to 25 cents. So essentially XRP might have 15x, but Tron literally 100x from November until January. IOTA also did about 10x from November, well, a little more than 10x actually. Like it went from essentially 40 something cents to $5, so about the same movement in XRP. Cardano from November went from 2 cents to over $1, so it 50x. So Cardano and Tron actually over the bull run period of November to January actually vastly outgained both XRP and XLM. So if you just look at that period, like XRP, XLM wasn't like a standout performer. Most other coins did the exact same thing. The reason that they actually, when it's all said and done, they had the most gains in 2017 was not because of the November to January run. It was actually because of the March to May run. And you multiply that by the November to January run, and that's why they came out ahead of every single other coin out there. Because they had 2 runs instead of 1. Now, if you're asking, well, why didn't Tron, IOTA, or Cardano have the 2 runs? The answer is actually pretty easy. If you look at the graph of Cardano, Tron, their price graph only goes back to like for Tron to September, for IOTA back to June, and for Cardano only back to like October. So the reason is because those coins didn't actually exist back in April or March of 2017, or they weren't significant enough for people to actually notice. If you look at Ethereum and not Litecoin, a lot of their gains actually also came very early in the year before May or June. They both had run-ups here as well. Now, some people attributed that to the Coinbase listing, but they were having the same runs as around the same time that XRP and XLM had the run. Fairly like end of Q1, early Q2 2017. So they actually had like, they actually had the run the same time as like these 4 major altcoins all had the run around the same time. So what I'm guessing is there was because during 2017, Bitcoin passed a certain mark. People were looking to diversify out of Bitcoin into other altcoins at that specific time. And what happened was that they were looking for any other big altcoins to diversify into. And Litecoin, Ethereum, XRP, and Stellar happened to be the ones that are actually were widely available at that time besides Bitcoin. So they diversified into those 4 coins, and that's why they actually went up in the first, near the end of the first quarter, started the second quarter of 2017. They actually benefited from the diversification out of Bitcoins into altcoins because they were essentially the only ones that were available at that point that people actually knew about. Obviously, Tron, IOTA, Cardano, and Binance Coin, they couldn't benefit from that first bull run because they didn't exist. Now, there were much fewer notable coins back in that early period of 2017 than there are now. So the coins that actually did exist gained a lot more advantage than if something were to happen now. So let's say if Bitcoin passes 8,000 or 9,000 and people regain confidence in the cryptocurrency market, which I actually believe they will. I think it'll happen around 8,000. And we might have to wait for 10,000 for that to happen to break a mental barrier. But even if that does happen and people diversify out of Bitcoin into altcoins, the each individual altcoin, like XRP, XLM, Ethereum, Litecoin, I don't think will benefit as much as they did back in 2017, simply because there's more choices available. There are more coins that are vying for that same amount of money. Also, I don't really think the large cap coins will actually gain as much as the small caps, because the reason that XRP and Stellar actually gained a higher percentage than Ethereum and Tron, Ethereum and Litecoin, not Tron, is because they were both smaller caps. Than Ethereum and Litecoin were at that particular point. You can see XRP's market cap was only like 200 million then. Well, actually, I guess Litecoin had about the same cap, and that's why Litecoin actually had slightly bigger gains at that point. So my mistake there. But if you look at Ethereum, it had a way higher cap than either XRP or Stellar, and that's why Ethereum didn't actually gain as much. Even though it did gain monstrously from a percentage basis, Ethereum did not gain as much as XRP or Stellar during that time period. Also, Litecoin was more noticed because it actually did get on Coinbase. Same thing with Ethereum. But just because XRP and XLM were at such a low market cap then, it didn't really cost that much more investment money to actually pump those two coins up, and that's why they gained so much during that time period. They're at a much higher market cap now. They are one of the dominant coins right now, so I think that if the price pump does happen, they'll probably behave much more like a large cap coin, especially XRP. So if the diversification happens, while I do think it might like quadruple or even quintuple, I don't think it'll gain like 50, 60x during that time. Of course, if a major bull run happens, it will gain like every other coin, but I think it'll be more along the line of like percentage gains as like Ethereum or any of the larger cap coins and not part of the small cap coins. So that's why I actually don't think we'll quite have a 2017 run for either XRP or XLM, because there are many, many more times altcoins available. People are looking at all the options they have, and it's not like Litecoin, Ethereum, Stellar, and XRP are the only altcoins available anymore to diversify out of Bitcoin. People are going to be putting money into Tron, IOTA, Cardano, VeChain, Bitcoin Cash, EOS, and all these other coins. So there's a lot more options vying for that same money. So each project is not going to get as much money as they did back in 2017, simply because there are more options available. It's like stocks. If Microsoft was the only tech stock and you wanted to invest in tech stocks, Microsoft would get all the money. But now you have Microsoft, Google, Apple, and whatever other tech stocks, Cisco, out there. When people want to diversify into tech stocks, they're not all going to buy Microsoft. And plus, Microsoft is a higher stock value, so to buy up each other level, you're going to have to spend more money. So those two factors coming together, I don't think Stellar or XRP is actually going to have the same type of percentage returns as they did in 2017. They still might have amazing percentage returns, like 1,000%. XRP going up to $3, $4, $5, like $5. That's still an amazing return. But I don't think it's going to go up like 100 times like it did back then. It might go up, with a bull run and everything, it might go up, 20 times, which would make it $6 or $7. But it's probably not going to go up 100, 1,000 times like it did last time, because there's more options available. And because people, I think, most investors, not the fan club, for XRP XLM have realized that regardless of like a FOMO or anything, the regulations are going to be quite a while out. So I think, and plus there's more regulatory eyes on manipulation in a serious bull run. So I think it's not going to, I think the bull runs are going to be more controlled for these, especially for these large cap coins, but there's still fairly safe options to make a good amount of money off of in the future. But I do think I don't think Stellar and XRP are going to have this 360,000% returns like they did not in the last bull run, but throughout 2017. They might still get like 2,000 or 3,000% gains, but I don't think they're going to get like 300,000% gains. So that's my analysis on Stellar and XRP, why they're struggling in the last quarter, and why I don't think they'll have quite the bull run that they had in 2017. I honestly kind of think that I honestly sort of think that for Ethereum and Litecoin as well. I do think Ethereum and Litecoin will hit their all-time highs. And I do believe XRP and XLM will break their all-time highs as well, but they're not going to be like, 30, 40 times their last all-time high. I don't think Ethereum is going to go to 40,000 all of a sudden. I think it might break 3 or 4,000. Litecoin, you might get to 6 or 700. I don't think it's going to go to like 5,000 or whatever. Same thing for XRP XLM. I think, XRP might reach $6, $7. XLM might reach, $2 or something. But they're not going to like $100, $200 during the next bull run. So that's my analysis. That's what I think. And that's why I think that based on historical charts graphs and just the increased amount of competition from all other altcoins out there. So let me know what you think. Check out my Twitter. It's in the description. Also, like and subscribe and share my content on social media if you like my content. Thank you and have a nice day.